I'd like to go ahead and call this meeting to order. And for all those who can, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. And Mr. Bishop, will you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Brittany, can you lead us in the roll call?
Chair Joseph Dillon.
Here.
Robert Bishop.
here.
Strauss.
Here.
Dan Esco.
Here.
Thomas Hutchinson.
Here.
And our fifth select board member, John Royal, is absent or excused.
Excused. Minutes for February 28th, 2022. Have a motion?
I make a motion to approve the minutes. Wherever they are. Let's see, where are they? For 2/28/22.
Is there a second? Motion is second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. Public address to the board. This is a time when the public may address the board on any item listed on the meeting agenda or on any issue or matter of the town. If you intend on addressing the board at this time, we ask that you do the following. Please identify yourself by name, address, or the company institution you represent. The public address to the board segment will last no longer than 30 minutes. Please make your comments concise and try not to repeat statements made by others. Please address your comments to the board chair. Discussion or debate on any issue may not take place at this time. The chair or the designee may answer questions on procedural matters. Please be cordial and respectful of others. If anyone wishes to be recognized when the board discusses an agenda item, please make that request at this time. The board chair may grant this request, address comments to the board chair, and be concise. We are meeting in person and making this meeting available via Zoom for the convenience of the public. Since we are meeting in person, we will not be responsible for any technical difficulties. So if you'd like to be sure to participate, please try to attend in person. Is there anyone willing to or wishing to address the board? Anyone on Zoom? Seeing none? Moving on, number 6, the approval of Dalton Hinsdale Little League Opening Day Parade on Saturday, May 7th, 2022, and raffle ticket sales on Friday, April 29th, 2022. And we have a memo from the Dalton Hinsdale League. Mr. Hutchinson?
I move we approve the Dalton Hinsdale Little League Open Day Parade on Saturday, May 7th, 2022, and their raffle ticket sales on Friday, April 29th, 2022.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Hearing none. Motion carries. Can I have a motion to open as a licensing board?
So moved.
So motion second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. So approval of the 2022-2023 annual underground storage tank renewals. Mr. Hutchinson.
We have 7 underground storage tank renewal permits. The Dalton Food Mart, the Cumberland Farms, Miller Services, Wacona Country Club, the Dalton Highway Department, Mass DOT, and Crane and Company. And all 7 of those have completed their paperwork and either have paid the fee or the fee has been waived for them. So I'm recommending that all 7 of the permits be granted.
Is there a motion?
Yes. I move we approve the 2022-2023 annual underground storage tank renewals.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Traffic Commission recommendations.
We've received a recommendation from the Traffic Commission regarding the Grange Hall Road crosswalk, saying that it should be at or near Frederick Drive, or where the crosswalk can intersect with another sidewalk on the opposite side of the street. We also had a concern about a crosswalk light at the South Street and Gertrude Drive intersection. And the Traffic Commission writes, based on the discussion, the Traffic Commission voted unanimously to recommend that a crosswalk should be installed at or near the Frederick Drive intersection as long as there is a sidewalk to accept people crossing the street. On the other crosswalk, it voted unanimously to recommend a crosswalk light like that at Depot Street and Main Street.
Is there a motion to accept the recommendation?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I forwarded this request to the Traffic Commission at a request of a resident that was struck by a vehicle down in that area. The second part of this, which is noted on here, is another crosswalk light in the area of Gertrude down by Green Ridge. And I don't see it on here as far as recommending putting one down there also.
So we have Frederick Drive and then Gertrude. Was it crosswalk? So was that a separate issue? Separate, yeah. Is that your question?
I see they note it in the top part, but down at the bottom based on, and I don't know if they're just referencing where they were thinking the one by Grange Hall should go, but they don't have it in there too. But
Okay.
the motion's been made and seconded, and I just think we should refer this to Bud to get working on this.
So really clarify their vote on the bottom to include, so the crosswalk light is at Gertrude Drive intersection and south,
As well as the Frederick Drive.
as well as a Frederick, so both?
Correct.
Okay. So I guess we can formally, we can make an amendment to their proposal here and just add that clarification?
Right.
Is that-
I think they have it on there, they just didn't note it at the end, that's all.
All right. So motion is second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Hearing none. Motion carries. And apologies, I forgot to close the licensing board, just for the record. Transfers between accounts for transfers between accounts for after May 1, 2022. Mr. Hutchinson.
Yes, normally we would wait till after May 1st, even to take the vote. The town council's opinion is that the vote can happen prior to May 1st, even so long as the actual transfer is not made until after May 1st. The Finance Committee will be meeting this coming Wednesday, and the town accountant would like to get a jump on this as quickly as possible after May 1st, so beginning of next week. So she has requested that these 10 items be voted to transfer between the accounts noted. Shall I just read them quickly?
Sure.
A number of these are coming from vocational education because that was underspent this year. So there's a good deal of money left in there that we can transfer out. So the first one is to transfer $5,252 from vocational education to 157 IT. This was for additional expenses in maintenance and hardware that were unexpected this year.
Have a motion to approve that as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion on this transfer? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries.
The second one is also proposed to move money from vocational education to account number 197, Central Supply. This was because of increased expenses of paper and toner office supplies. This is $9,250.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
I'm sorry, the transfer amount was $3,000.
Yes. Yep.
And on the previous one, the transfer, I was reading the wrong line, I'm sorry. The previous one was $2,500. So, my apologies.
No worries. We're following along. We're good.
Okay. The next one is a large transfer, also from vocational ed, to 210, the police department. The transfer amount requested is $40,700, and this is one of two requests within the police department. I have two copies of this. I'm not sure if you do or not. Anyway, there may be an extra copy of that. This was for the police department having been authorized to hire 2 additional full-time officers, though they were given funding only for 1 officer. And they were requested at the time of the budget hearings last year to come back or earlier this year, to come back and request the second salary when it was necessary. They have had 3 officers at the academy and 1 resignation of a sergeant. They've also had to fill a minimum of 80 hours per week on overtime for months. Now they only have 2 part-time officers instead of 5, and over 300 hours of vacation time for officers to use by June 30th. So this request for $57,500 will allow them to cover their payroll until the end of the fiscal year.
Okay, just for clarification here, I got 2 copies.
There's 3 forms for the police department altogether.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. So, right, they're all different. So that would be the,
Okay,
that would be the second, and that is requested to come from the 222 communication salary account.
everybody following? Okay. Fantastic. Chief, any comments at all, or you good?
I just appreciate doing that, because, we've been filling 80+ hours of overtime, and we were kind of started off, with 1 salary short, so, those are, one is expenses.
If you could speak into the microphone, that would help folks at home here.
Yeah.
I'm short, now we have
There
to,
you go.
everyone has to know that. So the salary is because, like Mr. Hutchison said, we started off short with 1 officer's salary, and we had to come back for that. And then, the unexpected overtime plus 3 in the academy. And the expenses were, gasoline has doubled over this last month, so we're about $2,000 more this delivery than we have been ever, so that's where we're at.
Thank you to you and the rest of the team for
Yeah.
balance this off, especially with police reform and everything else that's going on that's unexpected expense, like gas and things of that nature.
Thank you.
So, thank you for that. So is there a motion to, okay, Tom?
And just to clarify, because I was a little confused there, we're going to have 2 requests to go to police department salary. One of them is coming from vocational educational expense. The other will be coming from communication salary. So the one I just mentioned was $57,500. That is slated to come from the communication salary budget line.
Let's go ahead and have a motion on each separate if we can.
Okay.
Yep.
I make a motion to accept a transfer amount of $57,500 from communication salary to the police department salary.
Is there a second? Second. Motion second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. And the first one, Mr. Bishop, the 40,000? Yep.
Sure. I make a motion to transfer $40,700 from number 320 vocational ed expense to 210 police department salary.
Is there a second? Second. Motion second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Abstentions? Motion carries. Okay, now we have the
Yeah.
next one. Yeah.
Finally, the police department expenses, there was a grant which required a town match, and also their gas expenses have gone up, and they're asking for a transfer amount of $12,500, and this will again be from the communication salary, but this time to police department expenses.
Okay, is there a motion?
Make a motion, we transfer $12,500 from 222 communications salary to the 210 police department expenses.
Second, motion is second. Any discussion?
Just a
Hearing
quick,
none?
quick
Oh.
question.
Yep, go ahead. Mr. Esco.
How do we have so much excess in the communications salary budget? Just out of curiosity.
What the town makes available is $200,000 per year, and the expenses are generally on the order of $150,000.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. And thank you again, Chief, and to you and your group. Thanks.
Next is a requested transfer for the Highway Department. There's extra equipment repair that's been necessary. We do hope to fill the mechanic position soon, but until then, we do have to pay out. And then there's also street sweeping, which we did in July, sort of unusually, I understand, this year. But usually it's done in the spring, and so we would like to get that back before the summer season. So all of those, and rebuilding catch basins. There are several of those that need to be rebuilt. So the amount requested is $25,000, and this would go from vocational education to the Highway Department, from 320 to 420 expenses.
Is there a motion?
Sure. I make a motion, we transfer $25,000 from Department 320 to Department 420.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.
The next one is a request to fund the repair of our sewer flusher, which has broken down several times, and it's quite costly. So the request is for $5,000 for those repairs to be transferred from sewer treatment 499 expenses to sewer maintenance 440 expenses.
Is there a motion?
Sure. Make a motion, we transfer $5,000 from the sewer treatment 449 to sewer maintenance 440.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.
The next one's quite small, a request to transfer $150 from Board of Health expenses to the Board of Health salary. This has to do with the new health agent working more hours than the last health agent. The reason we're able to ask for only $150 to transfer is that the budget for the recycling coordinator and education and enforcement was not fully used. So we've been able to fill in with that, but we do need $150 to balance that budget.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I make a motion, we transfer $150 from Board of Health expenses to Board of Health salary.
Is there a second? Motion is second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.
We have two more, both from the treasurer. The first is a request to transfer $10,000 from group health insurance expense to employee fringe benefits salaries in order to replenish the vacation payout account. Several employees left during the year who were paid out their unused vacation time, which was a fair amount of money. So unfortunately, we have to ask for $10,000 for that. We don't expect this to reoccur. We certainly hope it doesn't reoccur.
Sure. Is there a motion?
I make a motion, we transfer $10,000 from 914 group health insurance expense to 919 employees fringe benefits salaries.
Second.
Motion second, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, motion carries.
And finally, we have a request to transfer $5,000 from account number 914, group health insurance expense, to account number 945, town insurance expense, in order to cover a sewer deductible of $2,500 that needs to be paid. And there may be some smaller amounts that still come in towards the end of the year, so we'd like a little bit extra in that account.
Is there a motion?
I make a motion, we transfer $5,000 from 914 group health insurance expense to 945 town insurance expense.
Second.
Motion second, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, motion carries. Great.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Esco?
are we tracking these, I guess, expenditure overages, if you will? I guess this would be a question for the town manager. Do you track, how much extra spending is needed for each department that requests these every year?
I expect to. This is my first
Yeah,
year.
of course.
So,
Just curious.
and some of these are one-off circumstances. I'm certainly concerned with any chronic either overspending or underfunding and determining which case that might be.
That's exactly the point of the question. Thank you. All right.
Let's see, now we're at the town manager update.
As you know, I spent a good deal of time over the last 2 weeks on the preparation of the town meeting warrant. I'm pleased to say that I believe it's a solid document and hope that the annual town meeting can work its way through it efficiently. And I'm pleased to say that the town report was distributed as planned, despite any number of potentially difficult delays, all thanks to Alyssa Machino. The motions and explanations document was completed just today, as one final change was made. Town Council confirmed that the vote for the accessory dwelling unit bylaw, in fact, needs just a simple majority. The confusion was due to a lack of clarity in the Acts of 2020. The wording in the Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 5, is clear that special permits may be required for detached ADUs without losing the ability to pass the amendment with a simple majority. I've drafted an invitation for bids for the police regionalization study and sent it to the Hinsdale Town Administrator and Police Chief. I hope we can finalize it and get it out so that we have sufficient time for the study to be completed before FY 2024 budgets are drafted, that is, before next winter. I'm planning to sign a memorandum of agreement with Pittsfield for stringing 2 relatively short lines of fiber optic cable from their water facility, one down Old Windsor Road and the other down Washington Mountain Road. They offered us the use of 4 strands, and I contacted Wacona to see if they might be able to use them, but they said they had more strands than that already strung themselves, and so we're not interested. Our plumbing inspector has given his notice, and the building commissioner is reaching out to some possible candidates. I've prepared a job notice and a job description for a new hire. Alyssa and I submitted the first annual report regarding our expenditure of ARPA funds well in time for the deadline at the end of the month. Since we were able to choose the simplified path of declaring all our expenses to be under the umbrella of revenue replacement, the process was relatively straightforward, though the learning curve was a bit steep. And that's all I have, though a lot of it's in the warrant and the motions and
Great.
explanations.
Thank you, Tom.
Tom,
Mr. Bishop?
the ARPA money that you have spoken for, how much is left for everything you've got on the dockets?
I don't have that figure with me now, but the vast majority of it, certainly, I think we've spent on the order of 10%.
Okay.
The largest was the water district at 145,000, then the radio repeater at 53, so those make 198, which is just about 10% of what we've spent, and the other expenses have been smaller than that.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Any other questions for Tom? Hearing none, thank you, Tom. Future agenda items? Anyone? Hearing none. Any item is not anticipated 48 hours before this meeting?
Not from me.
Hearing none. Any remarks of the Select Board?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Esco?
I would just like to thank the town manager for all his great work in his first year, first budget season, and town meeting, all the preparation, as well as his assistant, Alyssa Machino. Thank you.
Well stated. Thank you both for your great work. Very good. Thank you for that, Mr. Esco. And just a quick shout out to everyone that had their hands in the annual report, especially the Boy Scouts here in Dalton delivering those on Saturday. They did a tremendous job. So thank you to the group. Any other remarks of the Select Board? Okay, moving on to the announcements. The tax collector and assessor's offices have been moved from Town Hall across the street to the old Berkshire Bank building at 488 Main Street. You can continue to use the drop boxes located outside of Town Hall for any payments, or you can stop over to their new location. The Spring 2022 Household Hazardous Waste Day will take place on Saturday, May 14th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Lee Wastewater Treatment Plant. Pre-registration for this event is required. Please visit the Dalton Town website for more details. With the town operation of the transfer station, residents will still be able to use up their old bags and will be able to buy car permits and bag stickers both by check at the transfer station and on the town's website. The Dalton Open Space and Recreation Committee will be holding their third annual Pines Cleanup Day on Saturday, May 14th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. They're looking for community volunteers to help with trash pickup and invasive pulling. More information can be found on their Facebook event page or the town website. The following committees have vacancies and are looking for volunteers: the ADA Committee, the Beautification Commission, Dalton Cable Advisory Committee, Dalton Green Committee, Dalton Redevelopment Authority, Finance Committee, Stormwater Management Commission, Waste Management Recycle Committee. If interested, please reach out to the town manager's office by calling 413-684-6111, extension 202. The next meeting is scheduled to take place on Monday, May 9th, following our informational session tonight. So May 9th at 7 p.m. at the Senior Center with an option for Zoom participation.
And that said, I would suggest actually not adjourning until after the informational session. I'm sorry, that was intended to be an item on the agenda here.
That's okay. And a reminder for anybody that's watching us on Zoom, you can come on down for the informational session starting at 7:30. Great. Thank you. With that, good night, Dalton. Thank you. So we don't adjourn this. And we'll do a couple formal things from an agenda perspective. So we'll do the roll call. Well, I'd like to go ahead and, well, actually, let me back up. I don't need the agenda for me. Yep. Could I have a motion to reopen from recess?
So moved.
Second.
Do we need to do another roll call? No, we're good, right? And I always just like to respect the group. Can we just do the pledge again, real quick? Mr. Bishop, will you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great, thank you. Great, thank you. We have a couple of folks attending by Zoom, so thank you for attending. If you're just joining us, tonight is the informational session for our annual meeting, so we'll be going through the town warrant. And on Zoom, if you could use the raise hand, and we'll be monitoring that if you have a question as we go through. And for the folks in the audience, if you have a question, we do have microphones down front on each side of the aisle here. If you could just come on down and so the folks at home can hear your question or comments. And with that, I think we just move to Article 1.
Yes. Hello, Tom Hutchison, Town Manager. I started here just a year ago, town meeting, so I'm just closing it on the end of my first year here. And it's been quite a ride, and very pleased to be able to present this warrant and the motions and explanations document for you. I will note that I think over the last few years, there have been 2 town meetings in this spring, an annual town meeting and then a special town meeting. And this warrant includes all of the articles that we expect. So we're hoping not to have a second town meeting. Sometimes people go to one maybe and not the other. And we'll see whether it's too long for people and we should go back, but awfully interested in your feedback about that. My sense is that if we can get it done in one night, that's best. But please let me know your own thoughts as we move through the season here. So Article 1, the first, I think it's 11 or 12, really 1 through 13 are financial articles that are done every year and are usually not terribly controversial, though this year Article 3 is the operating fund budget, and there are some new expenses in that that I'll explain. Article 1 has to do with the revolving funds that the town has. These are funds that money comes into and money gets spent out of. In order to set up that way of doing things, the town meeting has to set a limit on how much money the town can pay out of a revolving fund. And this year, as in previous years, we have kept the amounts the same. You can see them all on the motions and explanation sheet. So I don't know if anyone has any questions about the revolving funds. Yes. Well, there are a number of financial items, so maybe there will be a better one, one that fits better than the revolving funds. Maybe the operating budget, or I'm not sure.
Yep, correct. You can step it from the mic.
Yeah, the microphone would help everybody to hear, I think.
It's just a general question. Sure. Can you tell us how much debt we're carrying, how much loans, how many people are not able to pay their taxes in town? I'd just like to get a general sense of our financial health in this town. Before we talk about spending money, I'd like to understand how tight we need to tighten or what our story is. So something about those kinds of general numbers in terms of the finances of the town?
Yeah, I think that would come during the operating budget part most usefully. So Article 2 is an article which fixes the compensation for elected officials. And this is just setting the numbers. It's not actually authorizing the expenditures. That happens in Article 3. So if you want to make any motion to amend the amount that the elected officials are getting, Article 2 is the place to do that. This is a way to be transparent about what the elected officials are receiving. Yes.
Who got the hand?
No, just please use the microphone.
Sorry. Something else that I look at every year when I look at the booklet, I mean, you can see I have a lot of questions. Every year when I look at the booklet, I see salaries, but under the, and I don't know if this is the case, but it always had the town manager, and it was never really clear about administrative assistant, like a breakdown. It was all just like one number, sorry, one number. And I'm just wondering if this year, is everything itemized? Like, are the salaries actually written down? Or is it just a total amount for salaries?
There's the report that was included in the
Thank you.
in the packet does include the each of the accounts that the town has and what the expenses were last year and are proposed to be next year. It's not a complete breakdown, but it gives you a much better sense of what's going to be proposed. And assuming there are no more questions on Article 2, we can move to Article 3, and I can speak a little bit more about that. Article 3 is the operating budget of the town, and that's what's included in this appropriation summary in the booklet, articles for the annual town meeting, and the report of the Finance Committee for fiscal year 2023. That starts in July. And the second half of that booklet is the financial summary of, well, the first half is the warrant. The second half is the financial summary, starting with an article and tax summary so that you can see all the articles on the warrant, what they're for and how much money they're for. And then also where the money that's not coming from taxes comes from. That's the bottom half of it. And then you subtract the amount that's not coming from taxes from the total amount that's authorized, and you get the amount to be raised by taxation. What happens then is we take the value of all the real estate in the town and we divide it by the amount of money that town meeting authorized, and that becomes the tax rate. So in the back half of this booklet is the line items for each of the departments. Now, it's not broken down within those departments, but we do have those figures available at the town hall. I'd like to make a couple of observations about this year's annual budget. The first is that we did a wage study, wage and compensation study, and we did find that the vast majority of Dalton employees were not paid as much as their counterparts in comparable communities. So that has resulted in a proposed increase in salaries for all town employees, some relatively little, some much more substantially. For instance, our dispatchers were paid about 38% below their counterparts in comparable towns. So their budget rose quite considerably because of this study. We have had some trouble recruiting and retaining employees, and we're hoping that this can help address that issue. That's the first thing. The second major change is that the town is taking over the operation of the transfer station from Casella, a private company. And this is being done for a couple of reasons. First, to, we hope, improve the service and expand the range of options that are available at the transfer station. And secondly, we hope over time to be able to reduce costs substantially. We can't promise that, though, because now the cost of waste disposal is going up, and it will only continue to go up. It's going to go up a lot more now that Community Eco Power in Pittsfield is being sold, probably to Casella, who will probably put their own transfer station in Pittsfield. And we don't know how that is going to operate. We don't know when it would start operating, but we do feel that we'll have more control over how we manage our waste, and hopefully we'll have an incentive for waste reduction here in town, as well as lowering the overall cost. So the town being nonprofit, we expect to be able to perform at least the same service for less money, and we hope to actually increase service and also be able to cut money. Probably not the first year. We need to take over the operation. Our intent is to keep all of the costs exactly what they were this year and see what it's like to manage that transfer station. And with that money, we hope to be able, with the money saved, we hope, and perhaps with some other money, we hope to gradually have our own equipment in there and improve the offerings, which would include perhaps a swap shop, perhaps recycling electronics, having a recycling-only sticker is one option as well. We've heard some support for that for people who use a private hauler for their trash but want to use the transfer station for recycling. And other odds and ends. Textiles are going to be required to be separated from the main waste stream, and we have already had a company express interest in parking a box there and taking our textiles for us. Mattresses are going to become much more expensive to get rid of, and they will no longer be considered something that can be treated simply as bulky waste, but will have to go to a facility that breaks them down and recycles what they can from their content. So these are some of the things that are going on in the world of waste, and we hope to be able to bring as good service as possible to the people of Dalton in the transfer station. Again, we don't anticipate that any of the things that I've just mentioned would happen if we stayed with Casella. And we do also anticipate that we'll be able to bring costs down eventually, if not the first year, because we are a nonprofit institution, more or less. So that's the salary and the transfer station are two of the major increases in the budget. Because a large debt payment is coming off the budget, those two items are more than offset just by that. So there are some increases and some decreases, but the overall increase in the town in the town expenses is let me see if I should have that right here. We're expecting to be about 2% rise in property taxes. We also expect the tax rate to go down substantially because the value of property is going to go up substantially because people are buying houses at more than they normally would, probably due to the pandemic. So we expect property taxes and property valuations in Conway to go up anywhere from 10 to 20%. That would bring the tax rate down, but spending, we do still expect spending to increase somewhere about 2%. So your average tax bill will still go up, even though the tax rate is going down because of the increased valuation. So just so there aren't any rude surprises there. But overall, we think it's a reasonable increase. Yes. Could you, yes,
Is this my opportunity to ask about changes to the transfer station, or are we just talking about the budget now and we'll have an opportunity to ask questions about changes at the transfer station? So it's not really about funding it, but since you brought it up, I'm wondering if the tickets are going to be the same, or are those anticipated to go up, whatever the permits we use to use the transfer station? I'm also wondering, are we having the same hours? Are we keeping the same number of employees? And are we paying them any more? Or can you just explain any other changes that are happening at the transfer station in the first year? I understand that some of those things you described aren't happening yet in terms of better recycling and that sort of thing. But just for now, is anything changing with ownership by the town? Thank you.
the major change in the operation of the transfer station right now is that we're working for you to be able to buy your car permits and the bag. We're hoping to have bag stickers, and those will be available online as well as at the transfer station. So that's the first sort of structural change that you'll see. Also, we're not planning to go with the big blue bags anymore. You'll be able to use up all your old big blue bags, but we're trying to reduce waste again. So rather than some people put their little bags in the big bags and throw them away, we're planning just to have stickers to put on the bags that will be obvious, and so when you throw them in, it'll be your own bag rather than a big blue bag. So those are the two major structural changes that we're introducing right away. There's a lot else that's being discussed, and we do have openings on the Waste Management and Recycling Committee if you want to get involved in that. But those decisions are partly going to be made because we believe they're the right direction to go, and they'll partly be made by what we can actually reasonably accomplish within the first year of running the transfer station ourselves. Our highway superintendent, Bud Hall, has run a transfer station, though he'd be the first to point out that the person who was actually running it was the transfer station attendant. But he has overseen that operation, so it's not entirely foreign to us. And we do have state and local resources available to us to help out with any issues that we might have. But those, again, speaking in terms of Article 3, the transfer station and the salary increases are the two major increases in the budget. That said, there were also, as I mentioned, at least that one major decrease with one debt payment coming off. As for the overall fiscal situation of the town and financial situation, I don't have a big picture financial report prepared, but we certainly, have numbers and will have numbers available at town meeting for more of those things. The debt is coming down now, but it's going to go up as soon as we start paying for this building. And we're not exactly sure how Wacona is planning to finance that. There are various ways of financing it, and they can get by for 5 years in one mechanism before going into another mechanism, and they may or may not decide to do that depending on what the interest rates are like and that kind of thing. So I can't really make a projection, but right now our debt is coming down. But again, not to lead you astray, it's going to be going up substantially when the bills for this building start coming in.
If I can just add a point of clarification, correct me if I'm wrong, the pro forma we did for the transfer station, I think one of your questions was the price for residents as well. we're not seeing a price decrease in year one until we get our hands wrapped around the operational model and the expenses, and we want to make sure we can, level fund, come out like almost like a zero. We do see some projected, I don't want to call it profit, but return, right, to then balance things off in year two. I think that's kind of what our projection is. So as we think of that, the decision of why we did that, we went through that analysis as almost like a second part of an RFP, because we only got one response from Casella. This gives us another option to consider. And we went through the analysis financially. The pro forma showed that was in our best interest as a town, not only from a cost perspective, but also from a service increase or improvement. Not that they weren't doing a bad job, but there's new opportunity for new services with that model. Does that?
We still contract with truckers to take the trash away.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions about the operating budget? Please use the microphone.
If you could just state your name and address, so everyone knows.
Yes, my name is Louisa Horth, and I live at 161 Raymond Drive in Dalton. And I just had a question about Article 3. It says, including without limitation appropriations from the sewer user fees. Can you explain that? How much is in that account? And I was under the impression that was only supposed to be used for sewer projects, and that if there was an excess, it was supposed to go back to the taxpayers. I guess I'm wondering that had been voted to be different than that? Or, how much is actually in that account and how much you're going to use? Thanks.
Yes, and I can plead some ignorance here in that this is just copied from previous years. This is the same article and motion that has been used previously. I believe that means that we are not going to set a limit on the sewer user fees at town meeting. That will be set by the use of the system. But I can't even say that that's exactly the same. I don't think that it means that we can, fund the town on the backs of the sewer users. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I guess that was my question. I didn't know if those fees were, it looked to me like it was going to be used for the general budget, but you're saying, no, that's not what's happening.
I think it's just that we're not, we don't know what the sewer use fees are going to be, so we don't want to
Right.
set
But
a
am I
limit
right
on
that the excess goes back to the taxpayers and that it can only be used for sewer projects?
The sewer user fees are limited to the sewer account.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it has to be used for sewer projects. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions about the operating budget? I do urge you all to take a look at it, especially the areas where it's increasing, and bring any questions. We're all available for questions before town meeting as well, so that's certainly something you can consider is just calling us in the meantime. Yes.
I just wanted to ask, I see the police department budget has gone up significantly. I just was wondering, what's the reason for that? I think I know, but I'd like to hear it. I thought so? Yeah. Thank you. And I also wanted to ask, under vocational education, I believe that's because we send our students out of district who want vocational, because we don't have vocational here?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's a very volatile budget. It depends on how many people actually attend vocational school, and it can vary by 100% easily one year to the next.
You want Chief Stroud to address the police department question? Go ahead, Chief.
Please.
Hi, everyone. My name's Deanna Stroud. I'm the Chief of Police, if you don't know that already. Our police budget did go up this year substantially due to the police reform bill. We no longer can hire part-time police officers. We have to depend on full-time only. It's an unfunded mandate that the governor signed into law last year. So we are now only able to hire full-time trained officers. And our training budget doubled because that's what the law requires us to do now. And I'm happy to answer any other questions. Dr. Rose, is there anything else specifically on that you wanted to know?
Communications went up a lot, too.
So I'm not the communications director, but that's, the wage matrix. I don't want to speak for them. So I'm just the police. I'm not the communications director. Go ahead.
So if we don't have part-time, do we have the same number of hours covered, or do we actually have more full-time, more hours covered?
So Mrs. Rose asked if we had the same amount of hours covered. Yes, we hired 2 new full-time officers last year to make up the difference that we used to rely on for part-time officers because we have to staff 24/7. So that's where that was too.
Yes, and the communications budget, a large part of that increase was hiring a dispatcher at 24 hours a week to help fill in on weekends and if in cases of absence or illness. So that's a 4th position that was not there last year, and that's almost $25,000 by itself.
Ms. Rose, there's another microphone over there, too, if you want to use that one, rather than going around the piano.
So the people at home can hear, that would be great, yes.
I just wanted to ask the question about other services that respond to 911 calls. I mean, do we only have police in our town? That's what I'm just wondering.
To
Mental health?
So we co-respond with the Breen Center. We have a mental health clinician that we utilize out of Pittsfield, and they respond to mental health calls with us.
Okay.
And that does not cost us anything.
Great, thank you. Article 4?
Seeing no more questions from Article 3. Article 4 is the CRA budget, and it's phrased a little bit differently this year. There was a legal issue that came up, and this will help make it all right. But that's the purpose of Article 4, is for the CRA funding.
Question, if I might. Do Dalton residents get a reduction in their membership at the CRA because Dalton pays into that?
I'm not aware of if there's a deduct or a lower rate for Dalton residents because of that investment. I don't think there is. Anybody else done that? No. With some of those other community benefit programs that they have, kind of look at the whole CRA program itself and not just the membership structure, but I don't know the details around that. That's a good question, though. And Article 5?
Article 5 is the operating budget for the Central Berkshire Regional School District. Article 6 is the transportation budget for the Central Berkshire Regional School District, and Article 7 is the capital budget for the district. 3 different articles, 3 different purposes for the votes, operating, transportation, and capital. There's a little bit more information in the, there's actually a lot of really good information in the motions and explanations, if you want to look at those. So the operating budget for the district is going up 4.81%. Transportation is going up 2.67%, and, oh, I'm sorry. Transportation is going down almost 20%. And the capital is going up. I don't have a percent for that. But the capital budget is largely for paying their debts, and the debts are laid out here. So those are, and the debts are decreasing so far, but they will increase, as I mentioned before, once the full payment for this building comes in. And there's also a separate handout for the Berkshire Regional School District funding here. They have some more detail about each of those budgets in their handout.
One thing just to share on the transportation budget real quick for CBRSD and all school districts across the state. The governor's budget came out and it showed a reduction in funding for transportation. So I know our state reps and state legislatures are pushing back on that budget to adjust that recommendation by the governor. So, but more to come, but that's the number that CBRSD has in front of them now from a budget perspective, and see what happens with the state budget when it's done. Ms. Rose.
Thanks. Thank you. You've mentioned a couple of times that once we have to start paying on this building, our taxes are going to go up. So I'm just wondering, when is that going to start? And do you know how much we can expect it to go up?
Those would be great questions for the district. Again, this all depends on when they decide to move into a different mechanism for funding. And some of that will depend on what interest rates are.
And
So-
Greg Boyne will be there, present at the meeting, and the superintendent, I believe she'll be there as well, so we can really get into some details on next Monday as well, on their budget, their cost, et cetera, and then how that's going to impact the taxes.
Okay, so Article 8 is for money for the reserve account. The reserve fund is a fund controlled by the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee is appointed by the moderator, so it's an independent body. The Finance Committee can be applied to by town departments for extra money in the case of unexpected expenditures. Usually, they end up spending about half of the $65,000, sometimes more, sometimes less. But we feel that that's a pretty good figure to allow them to address any unexpected expenses that come up during the fiscal year.
So can you give us an example in the past year so we can understand what you're talking about? What kinds of unexpected expenses were there in this past year that they had to spend money on?
You know, I don't have their, I don't have a record of all of those with me. If a piece of equipment failed unexpectedly that was essential, say a highway something broke down and they needed to replace it, it's not in their budget, they would go to the Finance Committee and say, well, this broke, or there was an accident, or something like that. So really unexpected expenditures, usually, I would say, capital items. Nothing, it wouldn't be used for salaries, it wouldn't be used for you know, small overages can be dealt with by a different mechanism at the end of the fiscal year. So these are really things that would hit a department's budget kind of hard. So I think there were 3 or 4 reserve fund expenses this year. One of them was for something to do with the highway winter roads. No, that actually has a deficit. They can spend in deficit. I'm sorry, I can't recall.
There was one from a safety, I believe it's a safety inspection of the garage the highway garage.
Right, the
in which the
doors.
doors do not automatically stop from a safety perspective if someone's foot or is in the way. So there was a request from a highway superintendent through free cash to pay for that, installation and repair of that.
Or the reserve fund.
The reserve fund, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, a great example because there was also a time limitation. It had to be done within 30 days or something like that. There, a fellow had an injury this year at the highway department, and the state safety people came out and did an audit of the building and said, okay, you've got to fix this, this, and this, and this. And they had money for some of it, but the doors were pretty expensive. So that was one of the transfers from the reserve fund.
What I'm thinking about, Alyssa, if you can help me with this, is that as we have some of these great questions that come up, and we just want to kind of review that answer or review the details. So for the reserve fund, maybe we can have our finance committee chair just share some of those examples as we talk through it, and just be helpful for the audience, because I think it's a great question. So, would that be helpful? Yep, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, that's exactly why we're doing this, is to let everybody know why these expenses happen and what they are, and why we try to prepare as best we can. And this is for what we don't prepare for, this particular one. So Article 9 is also one that we usually do. This is $200,000 from free cash for the purpose of reducing the expected tax rate increase in the 2023 fiscal year. This, as in the motions and explanations, I'll just read from it. This is intended to offset the expected grant for dispatch services. If the usual grant were for some reason not to be given, the town would cover the expenses, and this transfer would cease. So it's a way of we're covering our bases here, because dispatch is an essential function. They do apply for an annual grant. They get it, but there's no guarantee that the grant is going to continue from the state level. So this helps. We do provide funding for it, but it gets paid for the grant. So this allows us to pay the taxpayers back for having asked for that money, even though we didn't need it. If there are no questions, Article 10, is there, in case the Finance Committee believes it needs more money in its reserve fund, and we don't expect it will need more money in its reserve fund. So we will move to pass over Article 10.
And sorry for the interruption, Ms. Hutchinson.
No.
We have a lot to go through tonight. We kind of thought about it in an hour, but there's a lot more detail in here too. So if there's no objection, the other ones that we're looking here are still kind of financial related, but if we kind of go into the bylaws, if there's no objection from the audience that we skip those next few to get to the bylaws, would that be okay? Okay, no objections? Okay, I'm seeing, oh, Ms. Rose, yep.
I just want to say that I started out by asking a question about, do we have a number of how many homeowners can't pay their taxes? Do we have a sense of how many loans does our town have and how much, interest are we having to pay out every year? I would appreciate having an understanding of this. We're giving $60,000 to the CRA. I'd just like to know, can we afford to do that? I mean, I love the CRA, but I just want to know, can we afford to do that? I'd just like to have a better sense of where we are financially in terms of financial health of the town. And this isn't really helping with that. I appreciate having those other numbers if we can, for the town meeting at least.
Yes, I think that would be fine.
I don't know that we can come up with any figure for how many people have how much trouble paying their taxes.
Or just not paying their taxes. How many are not paying? Like, does everybody pay their taxes in town? Like, we have everybody's paying their taxes?
Timely, probably not.
I mean, it's just like
Yeah.
to understand where we are. I was just saying for the people at home, I just was hoping to have a better understanding, that's all.
There are dozens of people who, for one reason or another, don't pay any particular real estate tax on time. If that continues for a period of time, the tax collector turns that information over to the town treasurer, who then can institute a tax title taking. But the reasons that people might be late on their tax bills could vary so much that I'm not sure how much an aggregate figure like that would be. But I know it's dozens every half year don't pay their taxes on time.
Okay, also just how much we have in loans. I mean, I'm just trying to understand. Obviously, I mean, I don't want anybody's house getting foreclosed on. I'm just, how we can help with that, or how we, don't let that happen to people. Just trying to understand what is the financial, health of the town is the best way I can put it, to understand how much we owe.
Yeah, in general, I think the finances of the town are excellent. One of the measures of that is that we're not, the government here is not suggesting taxing people to the limit they can be taxed. Many towns are taxing right up to what's called the levy limit, how much the state allows you to tax people under Proposition 2.5. And we are well below what we are allowed to tax people based on the valuation of people's property and things like that. So the town in general is in excellent financial health.
I'd just like to point out, though, our taxes in Dalton are among the highest in the Berkshires.
And
That's a tax rate?
And again, the tax rate is a much less meaningful number than the average tax bill.
We've lived here 15 years, but we lived in Pittsfield 25 years. So we made a somewhat horizontal move, a little bit more, but our tax bill went way up. So we're comparing like that.
All right, so stabilization, retiree health benefits, we're very close to being paid off on our liability for that. We will not have any taxes from a prior year. So Article 14 is a bylaw allowing the construction of accessory dwelling units, sometimes called mother-in-law apartments, and intended to increase the stock of affordable housing in the town. One change that has been made from the way some towns do it is that if someone is proposing to build a new detached structure, that be subject to a special permit process where neighbors could come in and comment on the proposal and perhaps have conditions put on the construction. I certainly urge everyone to look through that, but that's the purpose of it. And we do have the town planner here who was instrumental in drafting and shepherding it through the planning board. So if anyone does have any questions, now is a great time to ask them.
I can present on this as well,
Sure.
if you'd like.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
And introduce yourself to the group.
Yes, we'll do.
You might want to pull the mic up just a little bit.
Yeah. Let's see if I can do something.
There you go.
That's good enough. I don't want to rip it off the stand or something. So thank you all for coming out. My name's Grant McGregor. I'm the town planner in Dalton. I've been here since July of 2021, and I've felt welcomed, so thank you all for that, and I'm enjoying my time so far. So I will be giving an overview of Articles 14 and 15. They're both zoning bylaw proposals or amendments, the first being the accessory dwelling unit bylaw. This use is currently not permitted under Dalton's bylaws, so if it were to be passed at town meeting, this would fall under Article 9, correct me if I'm bad with Roman numerals, accessory structures and uses, and it would be given its own individual number as a bylaw. It's important to note, that most zoning bylaws in the state of Massachusetts require a 2/3 majority vote at town meeting to be approved. Due to recent legislation, this specific use for accessory dwelling units, if attached units are allowed as of right, and or if detached units are allowed via special permit, this receives, it only takes a simple majority vote at town meeting for this to be passed. And so this particular use was brought to us before my time, or brought to the planning board before my time, back in, I want to say 2019 or 2020, and the planning board saw it as a potential benefit to affordable housing that's needed in Dalton and much of the county, and so they formed a subcommittee of the planning board to investigate towns such as Montague, Great Barrington, Greenfield, in addition to the AARP model bylaw, which is geared towards older residents, and they sort of nuanced what things like where the use was zoned, where it was allowed to be zoned, certain conditions that other communities implemented in their accessory dwelling unit bylaws, and then they nuanced those to best fit the needs of Dalton. And so that bylaw was drafted by the subcommittee and then presented at a public hearing held by the planning board on the matter back in February, and there was some public comment at that public hearing, and the planning board edited that initial bylaw text and submitted the text as you will read on the warrant now to the select board. The planning board felt that there was sufficient support for attached units being permitted as of right and detached units requiring special permit approval to give voice to any neighbors. The planning board also felt that there was significant support for the housing option as the use is applicable and potentially a good solution to affordable housing in Dalton. And so further purposes were listed as A, to create more housing options for town residents, B, to provide homeowners with separate space for family companionship, security, or service providers, C, a downsizing option for people who decide to remain comfortably on their property, and D, to provide homeowners with an opportunity for supplemental income. I can go through the definitions so there's a clear understanding of what exactly is being discussed. An accessory dwelling unit means a residential living unit on the same parcel as a single or two-family dwelling. So all that really means is it's an additional living space on a parcel of land that already has an existing residence. And this provides an independent living space for one or more people. It can take various forms. It could be a detached unit, as I mentioned. It could be totally detached. It could be part of an accessory structure, such as a shed or a garage, or it could be an addition onto an existing home. And that is important. That distinction is important because, as it's stated in the intent of the bylaw, an accessory dwelling unit within or attached to any single or two-family residential dwelling or in a detached existing structure shall be authorized as of right in all the town's residential and business zones, provided the conditions below are met. And the other point being a detached unit would require a special permit from the special permit granting authority, which is the Board of Appeals in Dalton. And so a brief overview of the other conditions. ADUs may not be in separate ownership from the main residence. They have to maintain a separate entrance and exit. Only one unit shall be allowed on a residential lot. A detached ADU cannot be located in the front yard. The accessory dwelling unit must conform to the design of the neighborhood. It can't be out of character with the other residential structures. Points E, F, and G are also all very important. They relate to point J. which are the dimensional requirements. So point E states for detached units, the gross floor area is not larger in floor area than half the floor area of the principal dwelling, or 900 square feet. So to break that down, the maximum size of an ADU that could be constructed would be 900 square feet, and any of the zones where it would be permitted. Now, that is assuming that the primary structure would be 1,800 square feet or larger. So meaning if, say, you had a 1,600 square foot home, the ADU would then have a maximum size of 800 square feet. That also takes into consideration any setbacks. Point J, ADUs will require the rules for any for residential structures for setbacks, lot coverage, etc., conforming to the table of dimensional requirements. And there's no exceptions written into this bylaw in terms of that. Other points, and then for F, it's this lists the dimensional requirements in terms of maximum square footage for attached units. And then point G basically states the same thing as E, being accessory structure conversion. This is assumed to be detached. Anything that would be attached would fall under F. Parking shall be provided. Construction shall conform to all applicable codes. And any existing accessory structure that's deemed non-conforming would also require a special permit. And I realize I probably went through all of that very fast. The table of uses, which I believe is included on your warrant, would just show the table as it would be amended. So if there are any questions, I'll take them now. Yes?
If you can come down to the... No, okay. No. Tell Tom, no. Tom.
Speak into the microphone.
Taking an older structure and then putting a new structure on it, what's it got to do to the building codes?
I would direct the building code questions to the building inspector, Brian Duval. I don't know what exactly the age of the building, how it would relate to the building code. But all these structures would be required to obtain a building permit, the same as any new construction. And that applies to attached structures as well.
Yes, I think that's covered under Section I. The construction of the accessory dwelling unit shall conform to all applicable standards in the state sanitary, building, and other applicable codes required for a residential dwelling.
One of the things to just make a comment, and I just want to say, we've had new leadership, and just to thank Grant for all your great leadership on the planning board and everything that you do as town planner. But in this ADU bylaw, just to highlight, if you're not familiar, One Berkshire has a Berkshire County-wide economic development plan, and one of those components is housing. And some of the challenges that the county has is certainly recruitment of new employees, because they get here and they can't find affordable housing, so it becomes another avenue for that as well. Certainly if somebody, as Grant laid out the other value props as well, but a lot of towns across the county are looking at this as an option to help with some of the housing issues within Berkshire County. Mr. Rose.
Just tell me,
No, Dr. Rose.
Could you just tell me what it's fine, Henry. Could you just tell me what the abbreviations stand for, P, NP, PA, and NP?
Yeah, sorry about that. We probably should have included a key. So NP means not permitted. P means permitted as of right, meaning not requiring a special permit. And PA means permitted via special permit through the Board of Appeals.
And then just a correction on Article 14, it's not a 4/5, it's a simple majority per legal counsel. Is that correct, Mr. Hutchinson? Did that change with the?
Yes, it is a simple majority vote, not a two-thirds vote. Most planning bylaw amendments are two-thirds vote, but a couple of years ago, the Massachusetts legislature created a new law signed by the governor that allowed bylaws that promoted affordable housing to have only a simple majority to pass.
If there's no other questions on this bylaw, we'll move to the drive-through bylaw.
Okay.
Any other questions on the ADU? Going once,
Mr.
twice?
Chairman?
Yes. Mr. Esco.
If I may just add, one of the general purposes of the bylaw is to, help the town implement its master plan, part of which contains planning around more housing. That's the idea. It's not necessarily more affordable housing, but we need more housing for people in town. That's key. And that's in the master plan. Some people participated, in that process. Democracy is only as good as, the participation level, I suppose. But in any case, we do have a master plan, and the ADU bylaw ties to some of the goals of that master plan. There's a copy of that on the town's website if people aren't familiar with the master plan. And it gets updated every 10 years.
Great point. Thank you, Mr. Esco.
All right, moving on to Article 15. This is a zoning bylaw amendment, so meaning this, the drive-through facility bylaw exists within the town of Dalton. The current table of uses and location in the drive-through bylaw as it is written to date is the drive-through facilities are permitted for banks, car washes, and financial institutions only, and all other uses are specifically excluded. That table of uses also allows drive-throughs to be located in all of the town's zoning districts. And so the Dalton Redevelopment Authority put this bylaw in front of the planning board, and the intent is to rearrange the zoning where drive-throughs would be allowed to be zoned to exclude them from residential districts and allow them in business and industrial districts. And this would also change the use from only financial institutions, banks, car washes to all primary business uses. The first thing you would think of would be a restaurant. This could also be something like a pharmacy that has a drive-up window as well. And so the current text of the bylaw also states this point B, the traffic impact study. That has not been amended from its existing text. The only things proposed to be amended in this bylaw are to add additional sections being C location, which is what I just described with the use being not permitted in residential districts and allowed in business and industrial districts. A point D, which are the historic district requirements. A point E, which is stacking lane requirements to the existing bylaw text. And I should also mention that a public hearing was held by the planning board on this as well. We received less comment than the ADU bylaw. We also received some comments from local boards on this as well. And these would all require a special permit to be a permitted use. Point D, the historic district requirements state drive-through facilities shall not be allowed in the town's designated historic districts. And point E, the stacking lane requirements, these are basically, these were pulled from other communities' drive-through bylaws. They're generally logistical purposes. I could go through all of them exactly. Generally, it's just the spacing between cars in line, and it's important to note as well that if there was a situation where traffic would be backing up onto a main road, it likely would not make it past the traffic impact study, and so that would most likely be a denied application. So if there are any questions on this, I would welcome them. Louisa?
just want to thank Grant. He's been, we've been working with him on this, and he's been so helpful. I just have a question. We have one historic district in town and two proposed historic districts. Does this, would it require the ones that aren't, the two proposed, would it include those?
As of now, it would not, but as the text is written, drive-through facilities shall not be allowed in the town's designated historic districts. So if either or both of those proposed districts were to be officially recognized, the use would not be permitted in them.
It's just kind of confusing because if they are accepted and in the future and there's a drive-through in one of those historic districts, then that drive-through will no longer be compliant. Usually with special permits, there's like a year, they review them, so the drive-through may be eliminated if they're in a historic district. So it's just really, it's a confusing thing for us. We would like it to say, the bylaw to include the two proposed historic districts so that it won't add confusion in the future.
Thank you. The planning board did, there was discussion at the public hearing over how that point should be written, and that was the language that the planning board voted on officially using. So this would be the text that goes onto the warrant. I believe that would, I don't believe so, but I do not want to give a definitive answer because it would likely come to the Board of Appeals.
It was. So, Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Esco.
I was serving on the planning board during these deliberations. Certainly challenging to write bylaws for a district that doesn't exist yet. That was a challenge that we faced, and we felt like this language would encompass future districts that were actually historic districts, but the other two are not currently districts. Designated historic districts. As to an existing drive-through in a future district, whether they would be grandfathered, if you will, or they would need to get a variance, I think we'd have to defer to legal counsel on that question. But it's certainly worth noting. Tom, would you be able to liaise on that question? I think it's an important.
I'm sorry.
I can write it down for you and email you. Yep.
So there's a couple ways to address, I think, the question. One is certainly to Mr. Esco's point about looking at the legal process. If a district's not defined today, but yet a drive-through was approved through the process, but then that same neighborhood became a historical district 2 years down the road, what does that mean for the drive-through? I think Mr. Esco's right to seek legal review on that. Another way to do it is to, if we were in support of this, is we can bring it back around to the planning board and make an amendment to that bylaw, as we kind of step through the process over the next year or so and go from there. The most challenging one would be an amendment on the fly during town meeting, because we need to have legal, I think, review on any type of those types of amendments to go through. But I think you're bringing up a very good question that we just need to figure out the process and the right direction to answer that question, if that's helpful. Okay. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that question. Yeah, they could speak at that time, at that public hearing for that. Yeah, so the question from Ms. Rose is that when a business is going to go through the permit process for a drive-through, that there's public comment during that time as well. So if there was plans for historical district to be defined, then that could be an appropriate time to say, well, we have this other process going on at the same time. So I'm sure that.
Microphone?
What is the historic district right now?
The Cranesville Historic
Yeah,
District.
the historic district is the Cranesville Historic District. It runs from the Pittsfield line to Park Avenue north. So the southern border would be Main Street up to High Street, Gulf Road.
I never heard of one before.
Sure. Great question.
We have some, the Historic Commission has some maps. They are basically adjacent to each other, if I'm not mistaken, running east from where I mentioned the Cranesville one ends on Park Avenue. They may not border each other, but they're, I believe, in relatively close proximity on Main Street. They do.
Can you repeat that into the microphone, please?
The first one goes from the town line to Park Avenue. And then the cemetery side of Park Avenue starts the second one, and that goes to Daly Avenue. The third one goes from Daly Avenue up to Orchard Road. So it's basically the historic Main Street corridor that we are proposing as the two new historic districts. And I'd like to say they were proposed when we did the first historic district 20 years ago, and they were both accepted by Massachusetts Historical as historic districts, but we weren't able to get the money. It cost money to do it, and we weren't able to get the money at the time to continue with it.
Thank you. Ms. Rose.
I was just going to ask, are those maps of those, the current historic district and the proposed ones, are they on the town website? And if not, could they please be on the town website so everybody can see that?
They are not currently. I would love to have a number of maps on the town website, and hopefully that's something. We have a Geographic Information Systems, GIS, contract with a new one with CAI Technologies based in New Hampshire, and so that is, we'll be working on that moving forward.
Just a PDF, it doesn't have to be an interactive map.
Okay. How could I get a PDF up there? I could scan one in, yeah. Sorry, I start diving into all the crazy GIS stuff I think you know about it. You used to work in it, and the answer could be very simple.
Any other questions on the drive-through bylaw? Good? Okay, great. Oh, microphone. We gotta figure out how to disconnect that microphone. Yeah.
I'm wondering why the Design Review Committee wasn't included as part of this bylaw. It seems like that's why that commission was set up to begin with, to review all, new businesses that are going on that Main Street corridor and make sure that they fit in with the rest of the town and whatnot. And it seems like they would be something that should be in this bylaw.
I believe that the drive-throughs would generally take the same character as the rest of the neighborhood, and I believe that the planning board felt that signage bylaws and existing bylaws were in place to address those concerns.
I think the Design Review Committee is, by our bylaws, is supposed to approve anything like this going through.
I think the bylaw itself is the responsibility of the planning board, and the design review committee certainly has, review of it and input, but not final. So the question is the design review committee, with, I guess, the DRC.
It's possible that the planning board assumed that the, special permit granting authority, in this case, the Board of Appeals, would be conducting a review, but not necessarily to the level of design review board. So my suggestion is make a motion at town meeting if you would like to add any particular language regarding that provision. Understood. So I think a motion should be made. Maybe a member of the planning board could make the motion at town meeting.
And for clarification, the planning board is under Mass General Law, the board who submits bylaw amendments to the select board for, to be put on the warrant. So I would be inclined to believe the design review board would come, I understand it's not written into the bylaws, so making a motion would be most likely the appropriate action. So moving forward, I can see where the concern lies.
Any other questions on the drive-through? Good. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Grant. Sorry, Ms. Hutchinson, Article 16.
Article 16 is a proposed new wetlands protection bylaw. And I do believe we have someone competent to...
Mr. Bishop's going to kick it off, and then
Mr. Bishop? Okay.
Yes, I highly recommend this to be passed. I've been on the commission for 33 years, and this is a long time coming. I totally support this. This gives us extra protection where we're not getting a lot of help from the state anymore. A lot of other towns have already adopted this. Dalton's pretty precious. There's a lot of neat things in town that we need to protect, and sometimes they just get missed. So this helps us to keep our laws in order. We're not out there attacking people. It's just out there. It's going to be more of an education process for our town residents, and it's going to be just that little extra protection that we can keep our resources natural and what we want to be. And like I said, I highly recommend it. And there's one thing that, if we had this in place, there's one business that keeps getting flooded every time we get high water, and if we had this in place, that would have never happened. And Cheryl, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, folks. I'm Cheryl Rose, and I am the chair of the Conservation Commission, and Bob's a member of the Conservation Commission now. So I guess I'm mostly here to answer questions because I think Bob put it very aptly. This is something the state has been asking us to do for a long time. The state relies on the local municipalities to really enforce the Wetlands Protection Act. We still answer to Department of Environmental Protection. They give us guidance, and in times of need, we certainly look to them to help if we had an enforcement order. It obviously doesn't happen that often, but we're going to have more and more pressure for development, and you got to put these things in place. It just helps us protect a little more of our natural resources and gives us a little more authority, should we need it, to deal with enforcement, because right now we have very little. If somebody is violating, we can give them an enforcement order. If they don't comply, basically the town would have to take them to Superior Court, which is an expense for the town and something we wouldn't want to do, and most property owners know that. It's difficult to get compliance. DEP is underfunded and undermanned, so a lot of times our little issues are not their big problems, and so it just gives us an opportunity to do a ticketing thing if that was necessary. Of course, we don't really want to, and everybody who works with us, I'm sure, knows that we try to work with homeowners to get their projects done. We just want to protect the resources. You can look at the top of these pages, don't have numbers, but On the second page where it talks about the interests of why we have a Wetlands Protection Act, because we're protecting our public and private drinking water. We're protecting flood control. We're protecting erosion and sedimentation control, storm damage prevention, water quality, water pollution prevention. These are, we've put together an educational trifold that you will find in your packets this year. I hope everybody's going to read that. We always prefer to educate rather than enforce. We want everybody to understand. We're happy to do as many site visits as you want to your property if you have a question about anything you want to do. So we just try to work with people, and this is just helping us protect our resources. So I'm really just here to answer questions if anybody has anything. And I hope it will be a no-brainer for the town, but you never know. People don't, always want something to change.
Any questions on?
Any questions?
No, seeing none? Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Rosen. Thank you, Bob. For interest of time, I'd like to make a recommendation to the board and to the audience that we look at Article 17, Article 18, and then skip down to Articles 28 and 29, and then we can loop back if time permits. Any objection? No. Okay. Article 17.
This article would transfer the control of land that was taken for non-payment of taxes from the town treasurer, who is the tax title custodian, to the select board in order to broaden the options for how to dispose of that land. If the tax title custodian remains in control of the land, there's only one way to dispose of it, and that is for sale by auction. If the select board has control of the land, it can be sold or leased. And one of the options that was, I believe, not discussed the last time the select board took this up was the option to lease the land, or at least lease the tillable land in that set of properties. Oh, and this is in reference to the map that was that is in the front here. The yellow shaded area could be leased to a farmer for plowing and that kind of agriculture. Forestry is also considered agriculture. This would allow the town to retain the land that's not shaded in the parcel numbered 213-4 as a town forest. It's adjacent to the North Mountain Park land that the town has already reserved for town recreational use. So there are two options for how to deal with this, with the overall property. And one is just to sell it all now, and we could probably be guaranteed about $145,000 from that sale. It's under agricultural preservation restriction now, so it has to be used for agricultural purposes no matter who owns it. There are two proposals on the table. One is to sell it now immediately and be guaranteed this one-time payment of about $145,000. And the other is to lease the agricultural portion and maintain the forested land as town forest, and trails could be created in that for the use of townspeople. My own inclination would be to manage that town forest under a forest stewardship plan, which is proposed in Article 22. And that would satisfy the Department of Agriculture's requirement that the land be managed well. And I'm personally interested in habitat preservation and mature hardwood forests, much more so than logging. I certainly know that selective cutting is necessary in order to create a mature hardwood forest, and the clearing of invasive species is another I think, appropriate use for that land. But also just passive recreation trails would be a great thing for the town. So that's more or less what I'm proposing, and this article would make that possible. Any vote changing the status of land like this requires a 2/3 vote. So that's the purpose of this article, and it is in some ways paired with Article 22 for the Forest Stewardship Plan. Of course, if the town does not transfer the ownership to the Select Board, there's no need for the Forest Stewardship Plan. So in some ways, these articles are proxies on whether or not the town wants to sell the land for an immediate financial gain or lease the tillable portion for some probably relatively minor amount of non-tax revenue for the town, but still revenue in perpetuity, and maintaining the forest for recreational purposes. So that actually is covering both Articles 17 and 22. Any questions about that? Please feel free to call me too if you want to discuss it in a non-public forum.
Yeah. Great, thank you, Tom. And then Article 18, Tom, you want to introduce that, and then the chief can speak?
Yes, back in 1966, I believe, the town voted to join the civil service program, which at the time was a great way to have departments be able to hire the most qualified officers rather than those who were personally favored by superiors in a police department. Since then, the situation's changed, and it is now considered much more in the benefit of a town to have a broader pool of candidates for positions. This is particularly true out here in the West, where a lot of the qualified candidates in civil service are in the East and are not necessarily a great fit for Dalton. And with that said, I'll just let Chief Strout give you the details.
Thank you. So civil service was created prior to police departments having policies and comprehensive ability to have guidelines and abilities to hire people fairly. And we have collective bargaining now with our union, so everything is done in a much more unified fashion. Civil service, right now, we just hired an officer through civil service, and it's a very time-consuming process. So we had to put a list out. They have 7 days to come in and sign it. They put the wrong list out. We had to do it again, and then they put another wrong list out. It just goes on about how inefficient civil service is currently. And then when we finally did get the proper list, 30 days later, we had 22 people come in and sign our list. 16 of them lived east of Worcester. They are not coming to stay here. They're coming to get our training and go back to where they live. And it costs the town of Dalton $45,000 to hire and train a police officer, and then they leave to go back to where they live. So every department, the only civil service department right now in Berkshire County is Dalton, Great Barrington, and Pittsfield. Great Barrington's leaving in June. The other departments that have recently left is Adams, Williamstown. And they just did a survey, 60% of civil service departments in Massachusetts are either currently leaving or actively pursuing and considering leaving because it's just very inefficient. And we can't hire local candidates. The candidates we had to choose from weren't even from our area at all. We had really well-qualified candidates from Pittsfield and Dalton that we couldn't even interview because people from Walpole and Boston got 1 point higher on an exam. So it's just frustrating for us, and we just want to do it a different and better way. So I'll take any questions anyone has, but for the sake of time, I was trying to be quick.
Chief, can I ask one?
We go in from Mr. Bishop.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, how does the Dalton Police Force view this?
So the union fully supports this. I wouldn't do this if they didn't. This is something we've been talking about for a really long time. This was, something that we've all agreed on is best for our department to get the best candidates that are local to us, that have ties to our community. Because right now we're, luckily we did get someone from South County that's somewhat local, but we're missing out on, local people who want to work with us. So,
Any questions? Great.
I must just explain myself so well. Take note, Mark,
Yeah.
take note.
Well, I just want to, I don't think a lot of community members understand the challenges that police reform has brought to small departments like ours. And I just want to thank again Chief Stroud for your creative thinking and your leadership team on collaborating with you on these recommended changes for town meeting. So looking forward to that discussion and vote next week as well. So thank you. And then we have Article 28. You want me to highlight this one, or?
This is, there are two articles on this warrant that are petitioned, and Article 28 is the first. This is the residents of River Street Extension petitioning to change the status of their road from a private way to a public way.
Yeah, I think that's general, just see if there's any questions on that. So a petitioner can bring forward, with the right, and our town clerk is here as well, with the right number of signatures on that petition to put on the town warrant, and then based upon the vote from the town next Monday on this particular request, it becomes an advisory vote of the town members back to the select board, and then we have another step in the process to go through to actually move it to a public way, if so voted by the town. So the petitioner who brought this forward, we will ask that group to make that motion at the town meeting, and then they can speak to it and then ask, answer any questions, et cetera, and then vote accordingly. So just want to make sure everybody understood that one, because that's a relatively, I don't think we've seen that one historically on the town warrant in the past, so that's relatively a new thing. And then, if I may, Article 29 is the select board was presented with a request to support the fair share, so we agreed to put it on the town warrant, so the supporters of the fair share amendment could speak to it and ask the town to vote in favor or just in favor or opposed to the fair share. It's not the official vote for the state ballot, which is in the fall, but just kind of gets the message out there and helps ask questions and have those answers. So another opportunity to just have a town discussion. So sure, we'll ask you and Dr. Rose to speak on that.
Thanks. Henry's actually just going to give out some literature. Just so you folks know, this is a question that's going to be on the Massachusetts ballot in November. It's called the Fair Share Amendment, and I'm part of a group in the Berkshires. We'd love anybody who's here interested to join us, because we need to help educate the public about exactly what this amendment will mean for our state. What this amendment asks, and first let me just say, the reason why we're coming to towns for support, resolutions of support is basically just for public education, because you guys, we are influencers of our neighbors. Not everybody can come out and has a chance to get educated on things, and they look to their neighbors to be educated about, decisions on voting a lot of times. So the Fair Share Amendment to our Constitution would raise the rate of income tax on the second million of individual taxable income. So this money, anybody who makes more than $1 million, the first million would be the same flat tax that we all have as Massachusetts residents, 5%. But then for the second, third, fourth million, et cetera, it would be 9%. They'd have an additional tax. We have a flat tax in Massachusetts, and it's not really fair, because people at the top have a lot of creative ways to shelter money and do things to end up paying less tax, and the working people often are the ones paying the flat rate. So this will raise, and this is going to, hit the 0.6% of taxpayers in Massachusetts. And the money will be specifically designated for public education and public transportation. And it will be written that way into our Constitution, on the Massachusetts Constitution, to change our tax code. It has to be done in the Constitution because it's our tax code. And because of that, it's already had to pass our legislature twice, and it passed overwhelmingly. 80%, nearly 80% of our legislature is in favor of it. All of our Berkshire reps, et cetera, are in favor. So it's really just an opportunity for us to learn more about what it is at a meeting like this. I just would say to you that we need this money for education. We've been slowly not keeping up funding with the cost of education and transportation. In the 1980s, a student could go to UMass and work a minimum wage job and summer jobs and emerge from college debt-free. Now, it's an average of $30,000 in debt that a student emerges with. So that's a big burden for a young person. Our roads and our bridges, over 90% of the bridges in Massachusetts are in need of some type of repair, and many of them actually have actual structural defects that need to be repaired. So we need funds to fix these public necessities, and this is the fairest way to get the revenue for it, and this is our best chance to get the revenue for it, is through this ballot initiative. So I think I'll save the rest to say at our town meeting, but if anybody had any questions, or you feel like you've heard some things that would make you question whether this is good for Massachusetts or good for Dalton, I invite you to, ask me now so we could maybe have a little more discussion about it. Our Central Berkshire Regional School District has voted to support this. The Mass Teachers Association is very much in support of this. We need this revenue, and this is the fairest way for us to get the money. And it's a sustaining amount because it's a change in our tax code. And it's just 4 cents on the dollar on the second million and third million, so, et cetera.
Dr. Rose?
I'd just like to thank the select board of our town for voting overwhelmingly to endorse this. And I just want to prime all of you, you're going to hear a lot of negative advertising on this from the big money. Get ready for that. We'd be glad to answer any questions in the interest of time.
Great, thank you. Thank you both for the education. Appreciate it. Any questions? I want to go back to the, first question I have. I appreciate everyone's time. Are there any articles that were important to you when you walked in that we haven't discussed? I'm going to go back to the capital items, but if you have a specific article that you really want, I see it. 24, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Mr. Hutchinson.
You want to take that one now?
Yeah, sure.
24 is providing $15,000 from free cash as a grant match for establishing the town's 2 remaining proposed historic districts. So if you'd like to speak to that, please use the microphone. We are recording this for posterity.
Yeah, the people at Zoom are still hanging on, by the way. They're still there too, so. Yeah.
I'd be glad to answer any questions. We've been trying to get these 2 proposed districts, and we got the first one established, which was 20 years ago. As Gus said, he didn't even know that we had an historic district, but it does give protections actually, it doesn't give protections, it gives grants to our historic buildings. A lot of them have come to us and asked, how do they go about getting mass historical grants? Well, you have to be in a historic district, or you have to be on the National Register. And so that's one of the reasons why we think this is important. Is there any questions? Oh, and Mass Historical would give us a matching grant. So we could get the $15,000 to match this. Or we'd have to apply for it, hoping somebody will help us do that. But we do have a good place where we can get the matching grant.
Excellent. Ms. Rose.
Thanks, Louisa. I'm just curious, I think I like the idea of the historic district, and it sounds great to be applying for grants, and I'm just curious if there are specific buildings you have in mind, or specific, once we get this, okay, we can apply for grants. Do you already know what grants you want to apply for? Like, what you want to do, and what buildings are we talking about, just so I understand better?
Usually, well, the town hall would be in this district. The old Nessicus would have been, I'm not sure if that would have gone down that far, but the churches, they're always asking, they need help. And they're asking if they can apply for grants for Mass Historical. Mass Historical is always a matching grant. But they could apply for grants, well, they can't do it unless they're in a historic district. There's a lot of history in town, and a lot of buildings in this, our historic corridor. And, small towns, they're, especially the ones in Berkshire County, they're all really doing this because it's really up to us to protect our history and to keep that small town atmosphere that really has our property values stay good. So it's something we're hoping people will approve of. It doesn't really do it. It doesn't hold back. Unless you are getting a grant from Mass Historical, they really have nothing to say about what you want to do. Like, you didn't even know you were in well, you're not in a historic. People that are in the historic district didn't even know they were in one until we put the sign up down there. And so it doesn't really affect the houses there. Our old Grange Hall was on the National Register, and it got torn down. There was nothing, there's no protections for buildings, and you can do what you want to your houses. There's no restrictions if you're in a historic district, unless, like I said, you get money from Mass Historical to do something for your building. Then they want something to say how that money's going to be spent. The historic district that's established right now is from the town line, Pittsfield Town Line, to Park Avenue, the Cranesville side of Park Avenue. The one we're proposing is on the cemetery side of Park Avenue to Daly Avenue, and then from Daly Avenue, and it goes up towards Orchard Road. It does go up North Street a little bit, and like the historic district now, it goes down South Street a little bit.
Great. Thank you so much. That's perfect. And then just bringing the group back to Articles 19, 20, 21, which have to do with capital project requests. Any questions on those articles at all? Or does anybody else have another specific article they would like to talk about? Again, I just want to respect the time that you dedicated for this meeting, make sure your questions are asked and answered. Okay, so no questions on the capital projects? And then going back to, I think, Mr. Hutchinson was 23, 24, we just talked about.
Yes, for Article 23, I'm requesting $20,000 from free cash for a grant match account. Some grants come up in the middle of the fiscal year, and if we haven't dedicated some funds to it, we don't have town meeting authorization to match a grant, and so can't take advantage of them. This is particularly true of grants from the Mass Office on Disability, which require a 40% match, but it's excellent for smaller improvements for accessibility in the town. There are some other smaller grants that it might be good for as well.
Any questions? Ms. Hurst. Oh, microphone, sorry. Sorry.
On Article 21, can you just tell me or us what are fire shelters?
Oh, yes. You want to address that one? No. So we have, the fire chief is actually the forest warden. So the fire chief is funded through the water district, but the forest warden part of his role is funded through the town. And when he looked at the equipment that they have available today, it really doesn't meet the standards that they need. So the fire shelters are actually those shelters that they use in forest fires to protect themselves. And so those are those, he's bringing up the equipment to a standard he needs, and then moving forward, there'll be some maintenance on that.
Thank you. Is the forest, so the forest warden, that is different than the tree warden? different job, or that's
Different.
the same? Okay.
Different.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. Well, just interest of time, we're at almost 9:30. Any other articles? All right, and one thing that's not on the agenda, I'm going to ask you all to participate, please, because you've been so good, very good participation here tonight. Just by a show of hands, use, 5 fingers, a 4, a 3, 2, a 1, score us in this event tonight, because I think this is the first time the board's done this type of informational session. So I hope you find value, because I also want, the engagement. I think Mr. Esco mentioned that, democracy is only as good as the engaged community in that process. So be honest. We're not taking names so quickly. Just kind of quickly looking around. Ooh, look at all this. 5. Ooh, wow. Oh, Grant's giving us a 2. Everybody. So, thank you so much. I really. Dr. Rose, what was yours? Oh, raising both hands. All right. We do, and I hope we have more participation in the formal town meeting. Ms. Rose.
I was wondering about the phone calling system that the town has for water being, what was it, rural water? Oh my God, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But can we use that to let people know about town meeting?
I think that's I'll defer to Mr. Hutchinson on that if we can. I'm not sure what the.
And I'll defer to the emergency management director. The only reason not to do that is to not have people expect that kind of call to be something other than an emergency. When we have an emergency, we really want people to pay attention. That said, it should certainly be tested at least once a year, and some towns use town meeting as the reason to, announcing town meeting as a way of testing the system. So I'm happy to bring that idea forward, but it may not happen because that really is the purview of the emergency management director.
And I'll take one more selfish moment, and everybody turns to our reporter over there and put those 5s up again so she get a photo and put it on the front page of her paper and go from there. There you go. Look at that, a little marketing. Thank you all, and if there's no other questions, thank you again for your attendance tonight. I really appreciate it. If any questions come up between now and the town meeting, don't hesitate to reach out to either Mr. Hutchinson or one of us on the board, and we'll get the question to you. So thank you again, and have a great night. Good night, Dalton. Oh, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? Motion second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Abstentions? Opposed? Motion carries.